our Zurich Lectures series speaker for 2022 is going to be Nancy Swift Furlotti. We had to make a change in the program because of some medical issues that developed for our previously planned speaker. But Nancy Furlotti has very kindly stepped in, and she will be the presenter for the Zurich Lecture Series this year, 2022. Nancy Swift Furlotti is a very well-known member in the Jungian community. She's lectured widely, she's written, she has published several books and articles, and in recent years she's taken a particular interest in publishing the unpublished works of first-generation Jungian analysts, including Erich Neumann, importantly. But Nancy has been the president of the Los Angeles Institute. She was the president of the Philemon Foundation. She has had very important roles to play in many boards, and including Jungian institutes. And we're very happy and very privileged that she is going to be our lecturer in Zurich 2022. So Nancy, maybe I would just begin by asking you a question. How did you come to Jung in the first place? What was your introduction to the works of Jung, and what interested you about Jung?
Well, it goes way back. I've had an interest in dreams since I was a child, very young child actually, and started keeping track of my dreams. And remember my early dreams, when I was 6 years old or 7 years old, from that point on. And it was something that really fascinated me. Unfortunately, my father was bipolar. And so he really struggled with moving in and out of consciousness and into the unconscious on a regular basis. So I grew up with that, this movement where he was logical and present and conscious. And then at times he would be in another world completely, which was the unconscious. Mm. And so growing up with that, having that experience, left the door for me from consciousness to unconsciousness very thin. It was like a veil that I could easily cross through. And it took me years to actually find a theoretical foundation or a philosophy that mirrored my experience. And that was Jung. When I first read Memories, Dreams, Reflections, yes, it just was, okay, this is the puzzle that has been missing in the puzzle piece that has been missing for years, and it just fit in and it completed the entire picture. And so from then on, I just knew what my path was and followed it directly into getting licensed, into getting trained, and moving into this field.
And where did you do your training, Nancy?
I did my training at the C.G. Jung Institute of Los Angeles. And also at the same time, I did some training at the Center for Depth Psychology, according to C.G. Jung and Marie-Louise von Franz in Switzerland. So
when would that have been? What were the years of your training?
That was, I became an analyst in 2000. So I started 6 years earlier in Los Angeles, and then started participating in the Centrum about 4 years into my training at the LA Institute. Mm-hmm. And I thought it was a nice complement to my training at the LA Institute, which was very, very thorough and very good. But being in Zurich, of course, as you well know, Murray, is a very special experience.
Very special.
And there's really nothing quite like it. If you're completely taken with Jung, and he's the projection of everything for you, which he was in those days, and to spend that time in Zurich and in a smaller training program that was very classically oriented, very interesting, quite different from my training in Los Angeles. So the two of them were a nice complement for me. But I had no intention of graduating from that program. I was interested in following through and finishing at the LA Institute. And then that's where my solid connection was with that group.
You got very involved in the Philemon Foundation. What was the story there? How did you, and what was your role?
Well, that was very interesting. In 2004, at the LA Institute, I was chair of the development committee. And on my committee sat Gilda Franz, who I'm sure most people remember. And she was good friends with Steve Martin, who had recently established the Philemon Foundation as a 501c3 organization in the United States with the intention of publishing Jung's unpublished writings. And so he was trying to figure out who to put on the board and who would be helpful in his new endeavor. And he gave Gilda a call, and Gilda immediately said, "Oh, you have to call Nancy. She'll be very helpful." So he gave me a phone call, and I, in that phone call, it became apparent that one of the projects he was most interested in getting published, in addition to the Red Book, which Sonu Shamdasani was continuing to work on, and the establishment of Philemon actually allowed him to continue his work, because at that point he had run out of money, and he said he was taking jobs as bartenders or whatever. I don't know if that's true. I know he loves jazz. But so there were all sorts of other projects that we wanted to do. And one of them that I mentioned that I wanted to do was the Children's Dream Seminar, which I had always heard about when I was in Zurich, but it was in German, and I don't speak German. So I was interested in getting that translated and published. And that was one of Steve Martin's primary objectives also. So we both landed on the same project, and then decided to really pursue that, which we did, and we got it published quite early. Yeah. And then the next project, so anyways, I did agree to join the board, and was a founding member of the Philemon Foundation as it got going. And then we turned our eyes to, Steve and I were very good friends, and we turned our eyes to Erich Neumann and his work, and the possibility of publishing the Jung-Neumann letters, which was something that was of interest to both of us. And we pursued that. Well, it was probably starting in 2004 also.
Really?
That early. And we were in communication back and forth between trying to get introductions to the Neumann family. And we're in negotiations with the Neumann lawyer when, for the correspondence, we had permission from the Jungs at that point. When we had the contract in hand, we'd signed it, we'd sent it back to him. And then we discovered that all the material that we were interested in and more had been recently put up at auction at Sotheby's in London. And so we were absolutely devastated by that, because there goes this project and all these years of work and trying to pull this all together. So I actually got on the auction. I was on the telephone, the landline, with the auctioneer in London, and on my cell phone with Steve Martin. And I was bidding, trying to capture some of this material, but there was a very persistent group on another telephone that was absolutely determined to buy as much as they possibly could. And so naturally, what happens in these auctions is the price keeps going up, and Steve Martin is saying, Nancy, stop it. This is outrageous. Nobody can afford these prices. And I thought, I want to see how far this goes. I want to play chicken here. Let's push this. And boy, did Micha and his family ended up making a lot of money off of that.
Thanks to you, Nancy. You pushed.
But it was disappointing to us, to say the least. But it didn't stop us. We pursued it. Again, talking to one or two of the other lawyers, and luckily they had made copies of most of the correspondence. So we finally got permission to move ahead with that, which was really extremely valuable. And
well, that correspondence has now been published. It's not the total correspondence, but pretty close, I guess.
Pretty close. There were certain letters that we just couldn't find. And after that auction, I continued pursuing that group to try to uncover their identity, and wrote a letter to them, which they never responded to. And I think I did locate them in Portland, Oregon, and spoke to somebody involved with that. And the material is just shoved away in boxes in a corner. They had approached the Jung family with the purpose in mind of publishing the letters, but Ulrich Kearney, through his lawyer, told them that just because they have the letters doesn't mean they have the right to publish them.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that was the end of all of that. It's sitting somewhere, and hopefully one day they'll release all that material. It's really valuable stuff, but that's just one of the stories that happens when you're trying to put pieces together.
Passion for Erich Neumann runs deep. I mean, you've done a lot of work on his unpublished writings, other documents that you've published in the meantime. What does Neumann mean to you? Who is Neumann to you?
Well, Erich Neumann was one of the Jungian analysts I read early on in my training, specifically The Great Mother and Fear of the Feminine. And I was so struck by his writing because there's so much feeling and deep understanding of the feminine in his material that I had never seen that anywhere else. Jung doesn't write with that intensely personal experience of the feminine like Erich Neumann does. So it made a huge impact on me, understanding. And then also Neumann was able to break down the stages of conscious development, which Jung didn't. Jung was much more interested in the second half of life. And so he kind of breezed by that early material and really focused on what he was interested in. But Erich Neumann really went back to the beginning and broke it down for us very clearly by weaving these stages of conscious human development through mythology, through ancient cultures up to the present time, and makes it very, very clear. He's really brilliant, absolutely brilliant in the way he thinks and the way he articulates things, and the way he brings in a sense of the feeling.
Now, your lectures this year at ISAP in October are really going to focus on the relevance of Neumann's writings for Jungian psychology today, but also beyond Jungian psychology. What do you see as Neumann's possible impact on our consciousness in our time? What does he have to offer, do you think?
Oh, he's got a lot to offer. He touches on so many issues that we're dealing with today, and he died in 1960. He actually died 6 months before Jung did.
Yeah.
But he saw what was possible in certain failures of consciousness, which is exactly what we're seeing today and what we're experiencing today in these incredible ideological and political splits in the United States, but also elsewhere. And he really describes the psychological situation so well. He, of course, lived through World War II, which was just an extremely traumatic experience for the world, and also especially for him. His father was murdered by a Nazi on the street. He struggled to understand that from all perspectives. Of course, coming up with his first book, Psychology and the New Ethic, to try to understand human ethics and the nature of evil and all of that. So he explains what happens when society becomes recollectivized, is the word he uses, where people have gone through their normal stages of development and they've become independent, and they've bridged the ego with the unconscious or spirit and created the ego self-access. If that then goes wrong, there can be a recollectivization where the individuals in mass groups will fall back into kind of a mass collective mentality, where they're not independent thinkers anymore. They rely on the mass thinking, the group thinking, which is exactly what we're experiencing now. So much of what you read on either the left or the right has to do with extreme positions, and there is no balance between those opposites. It's as if the ego self-access is broken apart and the middle ground is lost.
Yes.
And everything is an extreme position, but it's not a position that even comes from one's sense of feeling and ethics and internal authority and wisdom. It's a belief system that has been absorbed by kind of a mass mind.
Yeah.
And he describes that in a way that is very clear and really, for me, right on target.
Did he experience that? Where did he see that? Because it seems so clear now to us, this identity politics. I mean, you just have to choose sides. You don't think very much beyond that. I guess he saw that in Germany in the 1930s. Also, maybe in Palestine when he lived there, in Tel Aviv.
Mm-hmm. Well, he definitely struggled with that in trying to understand what happened in Germany, what happened with National Socialism, and how that whole movement was created, and the figure of Hitler as the kind of a messiah figure that everybody would give up their own identity for to follow this charismatic leader, and the danger of that. And then obviously later, after the war, during the Cold War, the conflicts between the Russian state and the rest of the Western state is another example of.
Now we're seeing that again. Yeah.
Yeah. And so he, I don't know, he was really prescient, to tell you the truth, in in the way he writes about what will be happening in the future and where we're going and we are right there at that point. So the real question for me is how to retreat from that, what to do to bring these two sides together, to bring individuals out of that mass-minded recollectivization back to their own sense of ethics and morality and individual personal values.
Was he optimistic? Did he think that was possible?
Well, he didn't really say, to tell you the truth. Jung talks about that also, and Jung is a lot less optimistic than most writers. I mean, he thought we were going through this terrible shift from Pisces to Aquarius, which would take 300 years, and there would be this struggle between the patriarchy as it exists now and shifting the focus to the individual carrying the sense of self and authority, which is exactly what Neumann writes about also. So they're really in line together with that. But my sense is Jung was more pessimistic about whether we'd actually pull out of this whole thing. As you heard me say in my lecture in Eranos recently, that he was quoted by von Franz at the end of his life as saying he saw the world completely devastated, and he wasn't so sure we were all going to make it, which is really a terrible thing to think about. But if you really look at the reality of where we are right now, it's very possible.
Yeah.
And I think Neumann was also seeing the same collective movements and shifts in the psyche, in the collective psyche. And I don't know, but it's
in your lectures,
very interesting.
Lectures, are you going to take an optimistic position or not?
I know, hopeful, aren't you, Murray? I tend to be a little on the pessimistic side, especially when it comes to climate change. Everything right now is distracting us from, I think, the biggest issue on this planet, which is climate change. But anyways, no, I don't pour my lectures. They're not seeped in my own personal pessimism. Let's put it that way. What I strive to do with these lectures is to generate a real spark of interest in the United States and in Europe regarding Erich Neumann. So I want to introduce this man and explain who he is, and then move into how rich his material is. The Origins and History of Consciousness is just a seminal writing that is extremely important.
Classic.
For the Jungian world, but for the world in general. And it's been published in publications since it was initially published. And it's really worthy of continuing focus. You know, we tend to, the old guys. Okay, so let's move on to what the newer generation has to say, and the post-Jungian, so to speak. But there's a lot that is that you don't want to miss in this early material, because this man was absolutely brilliant.
I think in Zurich, there was some conflict with Neumann. I think there was some competitiveness, envy, and so on. And he hasn't really been picked up and studied deeply in the institutes here or in other places. And I think Jungians have really lost a huge resource. So I'm glad that you're bringing this forward. And I think we need to pay much more attention to Neumann. Has his work been translated into a lot of other languages? Do you know?
Yes. I know for sure Origins and History of Consciousness has been translated into German, and I'm sure a lot of other languages. I can't give you the list, and I would imagine a lot of his other books have too. I have been involved with the publication of Erich Neumann's Jacob and Esau, which was a manuscript that he never published. That has just been published in English, and his Roots of Jewish Consciousness, which also was an unpublished manuscript that I helped get published, has recently been published in Hebrew in Israel, which is really wonderful.
Yeah.
And I'm in negotiations to get it published in German. And so we'll see where it goes from there.
Yeah.
It's a fabulous book. It really has to do with Neumann's pursuit of understanding around his own Jewish roots after he moved from Berlin to Palestine in 1934.
And then there are those wonderful Eranos lectures from 1948 on, and they're kind of scattered in a number of works. It's too bad that there isn't the collected works of Neumann.
Yeah, that's a good idea, Murray. You know, I'm watching your books come out, and we're now having the collected works of Murray Stein, which are so valuable that this is actually a very good idea.
Yeah, maybe you could organize that, Nancy, and also into other languages. I think it's so important to get Neumann out there into Spanish, Italian, Chinese, Japanese. I think it's a tremendous resource. And after Jung himself, I think there's nobody better than Neumann, including von Franz. I think Neumann is even a step above von Franz as an original contributing thinker who really expands Jung's works. And von Franz is brilliant, but she more or less repeats Jung. But I think Neumann takes it even further, takes it steps further.
He certainly did. And that, unfortunately, is what got him into a lot of trouble at the Zurich Institute early on, because a lot of the analysts there thought he was overstepping Jung.
Yeah.
Jung supported him completely and really encouraged his independent creative thinking. And so he ended up finding a wonderful, safe place to present his material where he was accepted, and that was at Eranos.
Yes.
And I think because of that, that original criticism of Neumann, that he was too difficult to understand, he's coming up with all these new concepts, and he's challenging the Christian value of ethics, and on and on and on. As you said, they're not teaching Neumann at the institutes in Zurich or elsewhere the way they should. And that's the case in the United States too. So, and I've heard this from other people who've gone through training programs, and they've gone through psychology programs, that Neumann is not top on the agenda. So that's one of my goals here, is to bring this material back into public view and really encourage people to take another look at it, because it really is important.
And I think you're the person to do it, Nancy. You have the passion, you have the knowledge, and I think we're going to have a wonderful time with you in October. Really looking forward to it. And we will do our best to assist in, if I can say, reintroducing Neumann into the Jungian world and beyond, because he really, really, his work deserves it. And as you say, it's relevant to our time, the training programs, the Jungian world, and way beyond the Jungian world.
Mm-hmm. It is. It really is. And his books are read well beyond the Jungian community too.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
Which is interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Especially in the arts, you know, he wrote about Henry Moore. He wrote on opera, you know, the magic flute. I mean, his scope is so huge.
He is.
And
Yeah.
you know,
He had such an interest in creativity, and he's got this wonderful compilation of articles in his book Creative Man that is
yes.
really, really worth reading. And he also gets into the mystical side of it too.
Very
He
much.
really understands these components of the human psyche and
Yes.
what's involved in that from the ground up.
Yes.
In exploring that. It
mysticism.
helps us deal, sorry,
Yeah.
Murray, it helps us deal with patients who are creative types to
Yes.
see that there's a difference in the way their psyche formulates itself.
Yes. Yes.
And that's important to know.
And the religious and the mystical for modern people who are not in traditions but have these experiences. I mean, Neumann is very, would say, not only appreciative but understanding and helpful to capture the value of those experiences of the self.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So thank you, Nancy, and we really look forward to it.
I do too, Murray.
Okay.
I do too. I'm rushing to get these things done, having lost a year of time, but I'm going to be there.
Very good. Okay, Nancy.
Thank you, Murray.
Well, take care.
Bye-bye.